guys, welcome to the video. This is going to be a layout update. I want to tell you about actually a couple issues that I've had with my layout over the last week, and then talk about some future changes that I'm probably going to make to the layout. And I was going to do these a little bit, not right away. I was going to do them off in the future, but given the issues I had and how I had to sort of work at fixing them, I think I might move those some of those projects forward and do them now. So I'm going to talk to you about those and let you know what's going on with the layout. So, but first, the issues I've had is the layout's been up for 4 years, and if you recall back from when I did a video on the keys to successful smooth running, one of those keys is good track work and installing expansion gaps into your track, because your track will expand and contract based upon changes in temperature and humidity. And I did that, and I haven't had any problems with them until this year. This winter, for some reason, I ended up having some problems, and the track expanded, or the rest of the layout actually contracted a little bit more than the track did. And what that did is it caused the track to buckle in a few places and actually twist and contort in the yard some. And so I actually had to go through and pull up track in about 10 different spots on the layout. Not sure what's different this year versus the previous 4 winters. Temperature in the house is about the same, temperature outside is about the same, humidity is all about the same, but something's definitely different. I put my expansion gaps about every 6 feet. I put about a 1 millimeter gap. For the first 3 years, that was fine. Obviously for this year, it wasn't. So you might want to put your expansion gaps a little more often. I've got some more in now. I didn't put any additional ones in yet, but I'm probably going to do that. But I put them in where I needed to get my track back to normal. However, in doing that, I've got a whole bunch of track now that's not attached to the layout anymore, both track and switches. And that issue coupled with another issue I had, and the second issue was I ended up with an odd short in my layout. Layout was operating fine. I'd operated it for about a half hour or so, and earlier in the day, and then later in the day came back and there was suddenly a short in it. And after checking out all the easy things, like I had accidentally left an X-Acto knife sitting on the rails or something like that, I started digging around. It actually took several hours for me to pull all the engines off to make sure one of the engines wasn't shorting, pull all the cars off to make sure they weren't shorting, and then start isolating sections of the layout by turning them off, and so that I could narrow it down to where the short was. And of course, the short was where the most track and switches was. The short was in the Santa Fe yard in Denver. And so I isolated it down to that yard because that's one electrical block, that yard. But from there, I actually had to then physically isolate all the sections of track. Pulled out all the feeder wires, just disconnected them from the bus underneath. Didn't actually pull all the joiners out, but disconnected them, and then physically pulled up tracks at each end of the yard to completely isolate it, and then slowly started adding power to one switch at a time, working my way down the yard. And in doing that, I finally figured out where the short was, and it actually was underneath a switch that I had had in the layout ever since I put it in. And the switch had worked fine, there's no issues with it, nothing has happened with the switch. But for some reason now it has a short in it when it is thrown in one direction, vice the other. It's a nice Pico Insofrog Code 83 switch. Highly recommend these. That's what I'm going to replace it with. But for some reason something happened with that, probably in the sort of the expansion contraction. Something in there has happened, and some of the wires that are on the underside of the switch are now touching when the switch is thrown a certain way, thrown to the diverging route, and it causes a short. And so that process ended up taking me from, instead of running trains for about 3 hours one day, what I was planning on doing, I ended up chasing an electrical short for about 3 hours. And in doing so, I've got a couple more chunks of my layout that doesn't have track in it now. So with that though, instead of putting everything back exactly the way it was, I had some plans to make some changes to the layout. And so having gotten to this point now, I think I wanted to go ahead and make those changes. One of the big changes I wanted to make is I wanted to fix my Skyboards. So this layout, actually, you guys probably don't know this, but this layout was never intended to be a permanent layout. It was only anticipated of being up for about 2 years, and I wanted something simple and quick that I could get down and get some scenery down and get some trains running, because it had been a little bit since I'd had a operational layout. But I was anticipating having to move at about the 2-year or 3-year point after the layout went up. And now that that has not happened, the layout's been here 4 years operating, and it's probably going to be here for quite a while. It looks like I'm not going to be moving for a while. So in doing that, this isn't actually the layout I would have designed or would have made if I'd known this was going to be the permanent layout kind of thing, or at least a longer term layout. And so with that, there are a couple things that I did that I thought would be good for a couple of years, and they were, but for a longer term situation now they've started to cause me a couple issues. One of those is the Skyboards. The Skyboards, if you recall from the videos I showed when I initially built the layout, they're just freestanding pieces of hardboard that are attached down at the layout and then are just freestanding up. They don't have any support structure behind them. They're not sandwiched or together with two pieces. And so because of that, that was perfectly good for the first couple of years, but over the years, again, with the changes in humidity and temperature and things, they've started to warp some. And so you can see here in these shots, you can see some definite warpage of them. And also they are coming together just with butt joints and everything. And then I spackled them and attached them. I didn't put any tape on them or anything because, again, I was doing this pretty quick. But those joints have now come apart some, or starting to come apart. So I want to fix all that. Now, I've been wanting to fix it for a while, but I haven't fixed it because in order to fix it, I got to take the whole layout out of an operational standpoint for a little bit and pull about half the layout apart. Take out this was built sort of in modular sections, and so I got to separate those from the Skyboards, put a framing in behind the Skyboards to get them nice and flat. And then on the section where it's dual-sided, where I've got Big Lift on one side of the Skyboard or Sedalia, and on the other side I've got Denver, that section I'm going to have to get another piece of hardboard on the other side of the framing and then blend that all together. So in order to do that, I've got to sort of take the layout apart, at least get it a foot or so apart so I can get in between and work on those. And to do that, then I'm not going to be running trains for several months. So I kept putting it off and putting it off. Well, I think now's because of that and some other things, I've kind of gotten to the point that I'm going to go ahead and do that. So don't expect to see any op sessions for the next couple months because I'm probably going to have the layout apart here. Haven't taken it apart yet, so I may change. I may get part way into this and decide it's too much work, but we'll see. Now, in addition to that, though, I talked about, if you recall from about a year ago, talked about making some changes to Big Lift because I really don't like how it operates. I don't really like how it's positioned. The way there's a crossover there between the northbound and southbound main lines, and even though it's sort of set up the way the prototype is, because of some other selective compression I've done on the layout, I think it's going to work a lot better if I kind of flip it around some. And so I want to go ahead and do that, and I initially had designed, here you can see the initial Big Lift, what it looks like today, and here was the plan I talked about doing maybe about a year ago. Well, now I've actually thought that I can make some additional changes to Big Lift. And what I want to do is, instead of confining myself to the existing module that's 2 feet deep, I want to go and expand that another foot and make it wider so it'll cut into my aisle some, but that's okay because I had a 4-foot aisle in there, so that'll just drop to 3 feet. And that'll give me a lot more space. It'll allow me to have a larger Big Lift with some more tracks, and will give more visual separation between the northbound main line and the southbound main line. And so I think I want to do that. And then there are several other changes. Once I started looking at this, of saying, well, if I'm going to keep this layout for a while, what else do I might want to do to this and things. And I actually have a luxury of, I've got extra space in the basement to do some things with. But I haven't done them yet because, again, I thought this was going to be coming down here. I actually thought it was already going to be down and be off in some other house. But so with that, here's a couple other options that I had looked at. One of the things that I want to do is go ahead and expand Big Lift, and then once Big Lift's expanded, there's a couple things I could do next. One of those things is actually twist Palmer Lake around to make the layout less of a U shape and more of a G shape. And by moving Palmer Lake down, that'll give me more distance between Palmer Lake and Larkspur. Will make the S-curves north of Palmer Lake a little more gradual, and it won't be quite as tight. and then it just makes the overall run of the layout a lot longer. So in doing that, I also can expand the minimum radius around Palmer Lake if I wanted to by doing that. Now, a lot of this depends upon how much track do I really want to rip up versus how much track do I want to leave existing in place on the modules and just change how the modules are connected together. So that's one of the changes I could make. One of the other things I can make is, again, Denver is not set up exactly the way I would want it. And so there's a couple of changes there I could do. One of which is I actually don't have the Rio Grande yard depicted anywhere on the layout, which is kind of a shame because I really like the Rio Grande Southern Pacific engines. They've got some great engines like tunnel motors and things that the Santa Fe and B&N didn't have. And I like that look of sitting out when I used to go up in Railfan, North Yard, there in Denver up at Pico Street. It was a really great, black and orange look to it with a few Southern Pacific thrown in. And that was a nice look. And I can't put that anywhere on the layout. And so I decided that I could go ahead and do that if I added an extension sort of in the Denver section. Now, there's a whole lot of compromises going on here by doing this. One is the Y that actually is not on the layout anywhere, Prospect Junction, has to be down sort of halfway through the BNSF yard instead of at the beginning of the BNSF yard. But that's okay. One of the other changes is that I really don't have space, or I don't want to take up the space, to model sort of 3 yards on the layout. Between a hidden staging yard, a Santa Fe and BN combined yard, and then a full Rio Grande Southern Pacific yard. That's too many yards, and just it takes up a lot of space just for trains sitting around. And so what I think I could do here is I could model the engine facility of North Yard, and then have the hidden staging yard act as the car portion of the yard for the Rio Grande. And so the engines would leave the Rio Grande engine facility, go back, grab their train that's in hidden staging already staged, and then head out south over the joint line. And I think that'll work out really well because that allows me to get the Pico Street yard in, which is what I want, have the wheel shop and the Rio Grande tower and stuff. And there's a nice overpass there. The BN's Renix yard is also there, but I'm not going to model that at all. But there are some other industries in that area that I can go ahead and put in and model, and will give a good depth of scene in an area that I really don't have any depth of scene, because that's one of the issues with this layout. Unless you set up for very specific angles, most of it is sort of cab ride scenery that's only a couple feet deep. And I do like that look of this long expanse where you can see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 feet deep into a scene and see engines moving around. And by putting this extension in the Denver area, I can go ahead and do that, because if you position yourself down sort of at the bottom of the 180-degree turn, you can look back and you can have a long expanse looking through the city of Denver and the different tracks and trains and things that are going on in there. And so I think that'll be really good, and will add a lot to the layout without adding a huge expanse of space. And then another more subtle change that I want to go ahead and do as well is the Santa Fe BN yard is not set up at all to sort of depict the way it really is, other than I've got the engine facility at one end and the yard at the other. And that part of it's accurate, but one of the things that is a neat scenic element that's there is there's actually a river, creek kind of a thing, South Platte River, that runs underneath the BNSF yard there, or in my time frame, Santa Fe BN yard. And so the engines actually leave the engine facility, head out over the bridge and into the yard to pick up their train, and then head back, cross over the South Platte River again to head south over the joint line. And so I think by sliding the engine facility back and putting on a slight angle, then that'll give me just a few more inches that I would need to go ahead and put that river in. And it's called a river, and it's really like overglorified creek. that the city's done some work on, so there's a walking path and stuff. And it's sunk down underneath the yard. And so that'd be a nice scenic element that I can add in there. And then also, if you notice here, I'm going to extend the backdrop. When I want to redo these backdrops, one of the things I want to extend them, because one of the things I found is when you're standing at Big Lift, operating trains there, you can see all of the Denver yard and the engine facility behind you. And if you're standing over at the engine facility side, you can see Big Lift on the other side there. And really those are actually separated by miles and miles. And while I've selectively compressed their distance on the layout, I don't like the fact that visually they almost look right next to each other. And so by extending the backdrop or skyboard along there, since I'm going to have to do a whole lot of work on the backdrops anyway, that will allow me, if you're standing at Big Lift, you won't be able to see Denver, and if you're standing in Denver, you won't be able to see Big Lift at all. And so I like that a lot. And then I can extend the engine facility, put in South Platte River there, and then that will give it a little more visual representation of what the actual Santa Fe BN yard is like. And then I'll go ahead and add in, like I mentioned, the Rio Grande facility at Pico Street, and then that will give me a nice representation there of what the engine facility and the wheel shop in that area of the yard looked like. And then I can add some more industries in. I am going to go ahead and take out, I had a couple small industries that were up against the skyboard, sort of behind the Santa Fe yard, and those never really operated well, and there's not very much space there. There's only about 6 inches, and so there's really not enough space, even if you put a building flats and things up there. I don't think I was going to like how that looked, so I went ahead and pulled them out, but that's okay because I'm adding industries into that new section of Denver, and so while I'm pulling a couple of very small industries out, I'm gaining a couple larger ones in the other area. And so I think that will give a better overall effect to it. So anyway, so those are some of the changes and things that I'm looking at doing. So like I said, if I'm doing all that, and I'm not going to do all of it at once, but even doing a portion of that, it's going to take the layout of operations for a couple months. The initial pieces I'm going to do is I'll do the skyboard and get that fixed around the way I want it, and do Big Lift right away, and then go ahead and change the engine facility end of the Santa Fe yard so I can go ahead and put in the South Platte River. And then after I do that piece, then I'll get the layout up and running again, and then go ahead and make some decisions on, do I want to go ahead and the next piece I would do probably would be the Rio Grande North Yard, and then once that was in, then I would go ahead and relocate Palmer Lake around. That would probably be the last thing I would do because that's already done and scenic and it looks good and operates good. And so rather than ripping up something that is already pretty well finished and done, working in these other areas that don't have scenery and stuff, that seems to be a lot more logical to do that first. So anyway, guys, that is the update for this one. Again, don't forget to put in expansion gaps. Very important. Have about a 1 millimeter gap every 3 feet or so. And you'll save yourself some problems of having to rip out track in the future if your stuff expands on you. So, but with that, keep operating your trains, keep running them, and we'll catch you at the next update.